Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, home of the modern whitetail hunter. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your guest host, Tony Peterson, and today I'm speaking with whitetail killer Tyler Jones. All right, folks, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, which is brought to you by First Light. You might notice that this is not the voice of Mark Kenyon. He sent me a text last week saying something like, I'm going to go get some Botox so I don't have to use so many filters on my TikToks. I'm going to be honest here. I don't even know what that means. I don't know what language he's speaking half the time, but I wish him luck on that with whatever that means. Today's guest is Tyler Jones. Tyler is a born and raised Texan who's one of the most successful public land bow hunters out there. He's also one of my favorite people in the industry. He produces a pile of whitetail content for his brand, which is called The Element. From their podcast to their YouTube videos, Tyler and his partner Casey Smith are dedicated to representing hunting as it really is. They show it as it actually happens out there, and they're really good at it. In this episode, we cover a bunch of different topics, ranging from setting realistic hunting standards to embracing new hunting challenges to really figuring out your own hunting style so that you'll love the process and every second of the time you're in the field. The lessons in this show are good for every month of the deer season, and they carry right on over to the off season as well. Tyler, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on.
It is always wonderful to see your face. And I got to tell you, man, I don't know, and this is no joke here, between you and Casey, who's your partner in crime there over at The Element, I don't know if there's 10 people in the country the last few years who have put together as impressive of a public land whitetail run as you guys have. You guys are, it's amazing what you've done.
Well, thanks, man. I been super blessed, man. I work really hard at it, but in the end, you know, there's a lot of things that have to come together for you to actually kill a deer way back on public land. So I just feel grateful, man, that I've been able to do it a lot, you know.
Yeah, well, you're being humble because you're on a freaking tear, and it is awesome to see. And Casey is not letting you pull too far ahead because that dude's putting down some big deer on public too. How many? Just out of curiosity, how many bucks did you kill this year?
Killed 4 so far on public, and I killed 4 public in 4 different states last year, and 1 here at my property where I'm sitting right now. That was really a big one. I chased him for a long time, so that was my best season last year, and I did not think I'd be able to top it. But if a few things go right from here on out, I may top it this year.
Yeah, there's still a lot of time left, and all those bucks were on film too, right?
Yeah, well, that's the one thing. I self-filmed last year a lot, and you know, the actual kill shots were not always on film. But I was just like, dude, I'm killing this deer, man. I mean, you know, it just didn't always work out for me. But yes, there's films of all of them, yeah, out there. So the majority of the footage is on there.
That is, I'm telling you, man, it's impressive. I mean, really, when you think about what it takes to go out, even in your home state, and kill one, we'll just call it a Pope and Young buck on public land, that's like a huge accomplishment in any given year. I don't care, even if you live in Iowa. I mean, it's not as big in some of these really good states, but it's still like no joke. And to have you guys come from Texas and go all over and do that it's pretty cool to see. And I know a part of your secret is this relationship you've got with Casey. And we were talking about this, you know, just before we got on here, about how important it can be to have somebody you trust to bounce hunting ideas off of one another.
Yes, absolutely, man. Like that is one of the keys, man. And Casey, you know, I'll let him tell the story whenever he gets on here at some point, but you know, his deer recently that he killed, that was really nice. He's on our podcast said the same thing about me, just being somebody that you can trust to just be in the right spot to help out when, you know, you need it. And so that's a thing, man, that like super underrated, and something that we value tremendously is each other. And that, like you said, somebody that you trust, because I mean, I've had a lot of, you know, people that I've dealt with over the years, just doing this and whatever else, and music, like we've talked about before. And like even people that you kind of get to know for a little while, and you think you might trust, sometimes can fool you, and so like that's just part of humanity, and that you get let down sometimes. And I mean, I've sent out cameras to lots of people that I thought were going to help me in a state that's a long ways away, because everything's a long ways from Texas, it feels like. And so, and you end up not getting any pictures, because you send them trail cameras and you thought you might could share some info, doesn't happen. And it's just like, man, but KC is truly just, I mean, heart of gold kind of guy, and really brilliant, like he's very smart. He can come up with a comeback faster than anybody I know. And he just, his mind works so fast, and he can scroll through maps. He's as good on a map as I've ever seen anybody be. I mean, he's just quick. So it's definitely the most value. And I think maybe the biggest key factor to my success has been just being able to work with him and pour over maps and think about stuff, Yeah.
And it seems, I guess it might seem like kind of simply intuitive to be like, yeah, having a hunting partner is a good thing. But man, you can partner up with somebody, like you said, who kind of really helps you level up, or you can partner with somebody who actually brings you down. And, I realized this recently. I've got a really good buddy, Eric, who I hunt with a lot, and he's really become a good whitetail hunter. Like there was a long time where, he would make a suggestion. I was like, yeah, cool story, bro. Like, we're just going to do my thing. But he's, especially in the last 7 or 8 years, he's really got obsessed with it, and he's gotten good at it. And it's fun to kind of strategize. And, we're like you and KC, we give each other a lot of shit, but like we respect each other's opinions and, ideas. And it really kind of seems like what it takes to have somebody who brings a lot of value to the table is somebody who's operating on the same wavelength as you. Like, do you have somebody who's willing to work like you are and has the same kind of goals? Because if you have a mismatch in that relationship where if you're the kind of guy who thinks you can kill 4 big bucks on public land, and you're partnering up with somebody who's kind of a weekend warrior, it's probably not a great match.
Yeah. No, and there's definitely, there are definitely things in every relationship that the two individuals are going to have as differences, like there are things, like I would say we're both pretty tough overall individuals. And that, I'm not trying to, you and I are talking, me, but the listener may not, but I'm not trying to say anything awesome about myself. I'm just saying, I would consider myself pretty tough, since I've slept on a lot of hardwood floors and couches, throughout the years and stuff. And it just makes you kind of like, you're kind of calloused to, it's like, if you have a place to lay down and stretch out that night, you're happy, as opposed to, I need my bed and my pillow, And so like, that's one thing that helps, is that we're both kind of on that level where we really are pretty simple guys, and we don't need like a ton. I think like at the core, as far as just beliefs and stuff like that go, we are very closely matched up, which is a big deal. But I think like you see a lot of guys maybe in the industry and stuff, I guess, that are kind of influencers or whatever, that, may start out together hunting, and then all of a sudden, like, they gain a little fame, and they think maybe it's time to part ways or whatever. And I think that, a lot of guys will do that for the sake of, man, I just didn't like the way he hunted. And I think that's, you definitely want to try to hunt effectively when you're out and you're using your own time and stuff. But you and I talked about this off air earlier, like, your idea is not necessarily the best one in the world, and like, if you go, I know you go, like to some of these states, and you'll shoot like a nice buck. He may not even be a Pope and Young buck, right? Well, somebody out there could have had an idea that afternoon and gone and done what they did and shot like a 160, because they're around when you're out there, when you're out in Nebraska or North Dakota or whatever, like, there are big deer out there, right? And if you come home without that deer, there was a plan somewhere that could have killed that deer, right? So you're you're not the wisest guy in the woods. You know, you just, if you can keep that in mind and work in a collaborative way with, you know, with your buddy. And, you know, like you said, if he works hard and he tries to get better, to learn more, like your buddy Eric, eventually you're going to get on that same wavelength. You're going to be kind of at a same level of understanding of whitetail deer. And then you can really, you know, that's when you really start to mesh and just hammer deer, you know?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it started to feel a little personal there with those examples, but I'm going to let it slide there, Tyler.
I know where you hunt sometimes, so like
I do really think that the value of pairing up with somebody who's of a similar mindset is so important, and it's also just really important to be with to work with somebody who's like, I want to keep getting better. And that's a message. I think we haven't pushed it very well in the hunting industry. And we do this with a lot of things, right? I see this with dog training all the time. I see this with a lot of stuff where it's like, we're going to give you the answer, but it's not really the answer, right? Like people always want to know, like, how do you scout this place? Or what kind of sign do you look for? Like, what's the answer? What's the answer? And I'm like, the answer is to keep challenging yourself and working hard at this stuff. Like the best hunters out there are not the ones who consistently always kill 200 inchers on certain properties, right? Like they may kill huge bucks and that's awesome. Good for them. But would you consider them the best hunters? Like, no, the best hunters are out there challenging themselves and trying to get better. And they're going, you know, I kind of got this nailed in this state. I'm going to go try this state. You know, like I was just talking to Clint Campbell about this because he just got back from Kansas and you know, he was trying the whole shoot him from the ground, decoy him type of thing. And he's like, man, that was no joke. You know, when you're trying to kill a whitetail around no trees during the rut, it's a different thing. But I promise you, even though he didn't kill a buck, he left that hunt a better hunter. And I guarantee you at some point there's a dead buck out there in Kansas with his name on it that's going to be killed that way. And that's how you get better. And he'll take that home, just like when you guys, you know, he goes home to PA, you go home to Texas. Those public land hunts where you're really challenging yourself, you're bringing stuff home that you're going to carry with you forever. That's only going to make you better. And you get two people like that working on the same wavelength. It is freaking, it's a rough time for the deer usually.
Yeah, it is, man. You know, the question I have, my dad has run a fishing lodge. He was a CPA in Dallas when I was young, and he decided he did not like the corporate ladder and the backstabbing and all that. And so he moved, he took whatever money he had made as a CPA and said, I'm going to start a fishing lodge, renovated this place, started a fishing lodge back in 1993, opened it up, still owns it today. And so we were at Lake Fork in Texas, which if anybody knows anything about bass fishing, I mean, arguably the best lake in the world. You know, it's 35 or something of the top 50 in Texas, including the state record, you know. And so really cool things that I got to see growing up. And one of the fishing guides that my dad got to know really well over the years, who's also a really good bow hunter, he's just an outdoorsman, you know, total outdoorsman. He always said when it came to fishing, he'd caught, we have a lunker program. It's called the Share Lunker program. And, you know, if you catch a bass over 13 pounds, you get a free replica and that fish goes and it spawns and they, you know, gain genetics through that. So he caught 4 that were over 13. And I don't know if anybody put more into the program than he has. And so anyway, he fished the Classic twice, just a heck of a fisherman, you know. And this guy tells my dad one day, he's like, because my dad kind of, he didn't learn to hunt really till he was in college. And so Richard, the guide, you know, as I was growing up real young and stuff, my dad was learning a lot from him, hunting on leases with him and stuff here in East Texas. And he used to always say, you have to ask the question, why? Why is that fish there? Why is he on that side of the stump? Is it the shady side? Is it the sunny side? Is there the windy side, or is it the leeward side? You know, like, what is that fish doing? It's doing something for a reason. It's the same thing with deer. Why is that deer there? So if you go sit in a tree stand and you go, man, I was so close, man. I had tons of bucks in there today. I think I'm just going to go back in there and try it again, you know, and tomorrow's different conditions, then you may just completely have the worst next few days of your life hunting, you know, I mean, because you didn't ask yourself, why were those bucks all 70 yards from me? You know, why were they all 70 yards from me? I saw a bunch of them. It was a great hunt from a visual standpoint, but I didn't kill one. So why didn't I kill one? And the question is why. And I always think back to that. And that's one thing KC does really well too, is ask, why is that deer doing that? He's really good and he's very observant too. He sees everything in the woods.
Yeah, I think I love that example of bass fishing and trying to ask yourself questions, because I found this with my little girls. Taking them hunting and taking them fishing has taught me that I have to explain everything. I can't just that sounds like a joke, but it's true, man. I get asked 412,000 questions every hour when we're doing something. And what it forces me to do is go, okay, well, I have to answer why. Like, they're asking me, why did we catch a smallmouth here when we've never caught one before? Or why, like you said, why did that deer come in that way? Or why didn't we kill that deer? And I just think that all of that stuff feeds the machine. The more you're out there thinking about this stuff, and I want to be careful here and to not make it sound like it's like guerrilla warfare against the bass or against the deer. It's not. Like, you can have a lot of fun asking why. But you got to know when. We always look at this and go, I want to go out and have that banging day where I catch a ton of spawning largemouth and it's a blast, and they're not even thinking about it. If you can flip a jig anywhere near their bed, they're toast, right? That's fun, but it's just fun. Like, you don't learn probably a ton. It's the same thing if you go out on a really easy deer hunt. It can be a hell of a lot of fun to shoot a gift buck once in a while, but you're not learning as much. And so it's the times that go wrong, or the times when it's like you said, that those bucks were at 70 yards, they never got closer, and two of them picked me off in the tree. What's going on here? Why did I get this wrong, or why did they get it right? And the more you start questioning that stuff, the more you make fewer mistakes in the future. And you just learn, like, this is just how this stuff goes most of the time. But I can just hedge my bets just a little bit better by trying to figure out the reasons for nature doing what it does.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and as you do that, or as you get more experience doing these things, you have more instances. Like when you first start out deer hunting, your why is maybe as simple in Texas as, we put a corn feeder out right here. Why? Well, because you might not see any deer if you don't. So, and why are the deer coming here? Well, they're coming to this corn feeder. It's simple. It's a big concept, right? And so that's your why when you start out. And then you get years and years into this thing. I mean, I've been hunting deer for almost 25 years, and you start to, your why may become something as simple as, or simple as detailed as why did that deer not smell me when it seemed like he was downwind? What was there was something in the lay of the land, or a thermal or something, that blows my mind that he didn't smell me. And how did that happen, or whatever, or just becomes really detailed. The whys do a lot of times, because the why is the kind of what and why of a deer moving from bed to feed in the evening and feed to bed in the morning. It's something that needs to be learned. But at that point, it's so ingrained in your head. It's like a cornerback in the league learning to feather or whatever. I mean, he just does it. It's nothing. So, your why becomes so detailed that, I don't know. To me, it's like you said, it's not necessarily that you're doing this guerrilla warfare thing. It's you almost are like a scientist. It's like biology. You're learning about deer and why they do things and how they behave and what parts of their body you need to be aiming for when you shoot. Is he going to duck? Is he not? All these things. And it almost seems like if you take it to that level, that you never will lose the fun in deer hunting, because you've always got something even more detailed that you can break into and try to figure out. It's really cool.
We present public land. I know you guys do, and I do too, as the ultimate bow hunting challenge, right? Like, part of it's sales speak, part of it's true. Like, it's tough, but we want people to think it's super, super hard because it makes us look better. There's a reason we frame it the way we do, right?
Yeah.
But the secret that I love about it is it takes me to places where I have to ask why. So, I'm not knocking this. Like, I don't care how people want to hunt, but like, I've got a property over in Wisconsin that has a food plot on it. Like, if I go there and sit on that food plot, there's not a lot of why. Like, I don't have to ask a lot of
Yeah.
questions. I'm like, they want to come here to this clover and they walk by and we can shoot them. But when you go hunt a new place, you have to ask why about everything. And I think about this, like, I'll give you an example. So the property that I hunted in Wisconsin this year for our 1 week in November series is a property my buddy bought this past spring. It was 90 acres. It's a beautiful property. It's so cool. But we'd never hunted there before. So we had only turkey hunted it and we scouted it, set up stands, and this is Mississippi River bluff stuff. Like, I grew up hunting this. Like, I'm like, I got this. Don't worry, buddy. But we start hunting it, and the deer movement so many times was not what I expected. Like, I had rut funnels. I had rut pinch points. I was like, brother, this is where this happens. Like, there will be a dead buck here. And I just was amazed at how wrong I got it. Like, I was close a lot of times, and how I killed my buck was like really close to how I called it, but quite a bit different. And and I'm sitting there and going, why did that buck peel off of that hill and cut through here this way, when I was like, I would have bet you money he's coming through this way, or he's coming through that way, or I would have bet you money that all the deer movement comes from this side of the farm to that side of the farm. And I got so much of that wrong, and I love it because it makes me go, why? Like, not only why are they doing that, but why did I think this? Like, why did we get this stuff wrong?
Yeah. Yeah, man, and you're 100% right. Like, the adventure, that you kind of get when you go to a new place, just kind of like the reason people love adventure so much is because it kind of is awe inspiring. Like, you see something you haven't seen and you learn something new and you think that's really cool, and the thing is, man, my dad tells this story. Go back to fishing here for a second. He had some family come in that they lived up north, whatever, and they came in to Lake Fort, world famous bass fishing, and they wanted to go try to catch big bass, right? And so him and like 3 or 4 other family members go out in this boat, and it's kind of packed. It's a bass boat, and they're fishing in Lake Spring or whatever. He catches like a 6-pounder, and like he basically reels it in, unhooks it, and throws it back in like one fell swoop. And they're like mouths open, like, oh my God, that's the biggest bass we've ever seen in our lives, And my dad's like, I catch several 6-pounders, a year, at that point in his life. I mean, he's, trying to catch double digits, And so it kind of is, you think about, like, if your circumstances are similar from day to day, month to month, year to year, you start to kind of lose this appreciation for, like the glitter and the glam kind of fades, right? And you start to go, it's like for us here, if we see in East Texas, if we see a public land buck that is like legal, which means 13 inches wide or wider, like, it's like, oh, this is incredible. Like, man, we got to get on this deer, And what he is he's a 105-inch 8-point, and you're like freaking out thinking this is awesome. And if that same deer, which also, by the way, weighs 140 pounds, if that same deer, was in Iowa, they would be thinking, what is wrong with this emaciated, creature here, And so it's kind of one of those things where, like, the moving around and having that adventure, it brings some kind of awe into you, and it also continues to just make you ask why, like you said, because you've never seen that before. You've never seen it happen that way. And so, it helps you to learn more and to kind of spread those ideologies across in different states and use it in different ways, and hopefully become a better hunter, because it's my dad always says it's fun to go deer hunting, but it's also fun to shoot deer, and so it's really fun to shoot deer. So, like pulling the trigger, that's the pinnacle, People say I don't have to pull a trigger to be happy, and I feel the same way. But dude, I don't sit there and shake like violently the rest of the hunt. You know what I mean? Like I shake violently after I've shot a deer, you know, so that's what's the most fun.
Yeah. We've kind of, we like to distill stuff down to easy explanations, right? Like I just love being out there, like, well, yeah, that's like 20% or whatever percentage of it is. There's a lot going on there. Like there's more to it. And I've come to that realization with myself where I'm like, man, I just like shooting deer. Like I'm not going to apologize for it. Like it's a thing that I want to do 4, 5, 6, 7 times a year. And I love it. And I want to back up a second though, and ask you a question. So when you bring up this example of, seeing a barely legal buck down there in Texas on public land, you kind of compare it to Iowa. Do you worry? Because I wonder if you have the same worries I do. So when you guys are filming on public land, it's impossible, and this happens with our social media too. It's impossible not to kind of run a highlight reel, right? Like you just nobody wants to see the 7 hours you sat there and didn't see anything, and you're like, I want to go home, right? So you edit this stuff down to the highlights. And when it comes to guys like you and KC, the highlight reel the last couple of years is amazing. And so people see that. And are you just worried like people are going to look at that and go, that's what to expect out there? Like, are you worried about the stuff that's left on the cutting room floor? Because I fight with that all the time.
Yes, I fight with it too, man. Like, so 2 years ago, I killed my first Texas public land buck, and 2019. And so I actually, everything went right. And I did some things that were very much right, but it could have gone wrong too. He had to been really close to getting my win when he came in. I mean, he was not downwind, but he was working towards my wind as he got out of his bed and worked up. But I mean, essentially, I'm kind of going into too much detail, but like he gets out of his bed, and I basically watch him stand up. I didn't see him stand up, but I saw him standing where he was bedded, no doubt in my mind. And he's like 80 yards or maybe 90 yards in persimmons pretty much. And he just stands there. I mean, you've probably watched bucks get out of your bed. And if you haven't, what they do is like, it's like the same as you, like when you wake up from a hard nap, like you don't do anything for like 20 minutes, you just kind of stand there and you're like, you pee and then you just itch some stuff, and you just stand there and look around. And then finally you get a little more fired up, and this deer, he went over and did some scrape type stuff, and anyway, like I got like a lot of footage, a lot of what they call pre-roll of this deer through the persimmons doing that kind of stuff. And, from 80 or 90 yards. So it's pretty good footage, and I decided to put a lot of that in there instead of, outdoor TV edit where you show a quick clip and then the next, 5 seconds he's coming in and getting shot. And I had a lot of people that surprisingly said that they really liked that, and that it made them feel like they were in the stand almost, And so we still are battling it, though. It's weird because you would think that after that I would just go, okay, well, let me just put as much deer footage in there as possible, and make it like a real hunt. And at some point, like people still, you can look at YouTube. People don't care to see does. People don't care to see small bucks, really, even on public land. A lot of times it's weird, like we shoot some bucks that I'm proud of, and I send you pictures, a deer or whatever that are 105 inches, but like it's just, I don't know, like even hardcore hunters that can appreciate that will still a lot of times go watch a 160 killed on private over something that was worked really hard for, maybe that's a much smaller deer. And so it is something that like I constantly battle. And actually with our South Dakota series this year, I thought, well, we'll cut these things up because there was a lot of us hunting, and it was an 8-day hunt, so it was long. And I was able to make 10 videos that probably averaged about 10 minutes. And I thought this will be cool, and like people will hang in there for 10 minutes, surely, and they didn't really do that great on YouTube. And we killed 3 bucks on that trip. We killed 3, good rack bucks on that trip. And so, I don't know, I was a little bit, I was a little bit perplexed, and we released a video somewhere around beginning of October as well of a deer I killed on public in Kansas last year. Not a huge deer, um, and it was like 38-minute video, and I mean it's in literally since October it's got like 150,000 views. I mean, and just blows my mind because he's not that big of a deer, but there's just I don't know. I think people do appreciate a little bit of cool deer footage and being like you're in the hunt as opposed to that highlight rock and roll music kind of stuff, sometimes. So I don't know. I don't know really how to answer the question. Other than just like you, I fight this a lot and I try to figure out what do people want to watch. And at the same time, like there's an artistic aspect that I like as well, where and things mean like things have sentiment to me as well that, in some of the hunts and I'm like, man, if I take that out, I don't know if I'll ever remember to put that back in one day when I make my video for myself, whatever. Like I'm just going to watch this on YouTube forever. And then I'm going to forget that little thing happened that really meant a lot to me, So yep. It's a big balancing thing that I can't really figure out as well.
It's tough, man. And I think we're in a transitionary period here because for a while, I made the conscious decision to target public land whitetails starting in 2010. And it solely because of my job at Peterson's bow hunting. And I was like, man, this is not relatable stuff here. Like, I'm like, the audience is telling me. And so it was a business decision partly, and it was partly just because I want to challenge myself. And at that time, it was like, if you went out and killed a buck on public land, people were like, holy cow. Like I remember people saying like, I didn't even think you could do this. You know what I mean? Like
when I started, I was the same way. I was like, I don't think that's hard to do. But of course we're in East Texas. It is hard to do here for sure. But
it's everybody, I'm not saying Texas is easy in any aspect, believe me, but everybody thinks they live in the hardest place to hunt. And you know what I mean? Like, and so we always do that. We bring that to the table and we go, well, yeah, I guess you could go do this here, but can you do it there? And we've seen this over and over. And it's just generally hard where there's lots of pressure. And if you combine that with low deer density, it gets harder. But it's so individualized. Like there's so many different variables that go on there. So I'm always like really careful about those statements. But the thing that happened is, and I wasn't the only one, the hunting public guys, they were working for Winky and they were like, man, we're going to go out and do this differently. And they crushed it right out of the gate. Like, a lot of people saw that hole in the market. And what we did was we filled it really fast and we made public land hunting really popular. And now we've sort of nullified the built-in like belief of the challenge. Like we've sort of said, well, we've seen enough people do this and enough people promote this. So we do what we always do. And now we go, where's the trophies? Like, it used to be like, imagine, 8 years ago, if you went out and killed 2 Pope and Young bucks on public land out of state, like that was a big deal, right? Now you can go kill 4 and you're like, yeah, some of these videos don't even do that well. Like people are already like, oh, I need to see 6, bro. I need to see 180s. And it's this cycle of trophy hunting that's just, we can't really get out of our own way with it. And I don't know where we go next with this, but we're going to burn this public land thing to the ground probably. And have to go hunt with self bows and loincloths or something. I don't know. Maybe sit in a tree and drop a brick on them. I don't know what the hell we got to do, but it's going to change. And it is the way it is. But I still think the passion that you're bringing to it and the idea that you're looking at that going, listen, I don't know. I feel like this is what people want to see. Like, I think that's a good thing. Like, I think showing people more than, like you said, the rock music and the montage of the deer coming in and then killing it and the high fives and all that stuff. Like I think that's important still, no matter even if the perception's changing out there, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I think also that one thing we try to do, and I think it's healthy, I think it's also really hard at times for us, is we have, bow hunting is really hard, man. Like for guys like some of the people you've talked about on this show, and for you, it's you're so experienced and it happens for you quite a bit compared to other people. You know what I mean? And you get more shots than other people because maybe you're a better hunter. If we're just being frank, you because you've spent so much time outside, and you're spending so much time in a stand that you're going to get more opportunities as well. And so like it's different than the majority of the public. And I'm starting to really understand this, where, people that even love deer hunting here locally, for us, it's very normal to hunt a small piece of property and, spend a lot of time on it. And what ends up happening is, this is the one chance that this guy gets to shoot a deer all year. And, the deer sees him draw and he shoots at the deer and it's high dead zone or whatever. And never find the deer. And I've had lots of people that I know in the last couple of years that, love deer hunting and spend a lot of time out there, and maybe haven't had quite as much time as I've been blessed to have in the stand, that, they get some pretty good bucks in front of them here and there, and they just don't finish the job because it's hard to shoot a deer with the bow and kill it because they move. And, especially when you're not hunting a feeder or a small food plot, a deer is walking through a small shooting lane at some point. It's just tough. And so I think that to get back to what I was saying is that we have shown some of our failures on video, and some of our highest viewed videos are failed videos. And we just hope that sends that message that you're kind of talking about, is like that kind of gets rid of some of the disconnect of highlight reel, the universe we live in right now. That's, like I was saying earlier with like TikTok, it's like show me 15 seconds of something I've never seen before, and instead it says, here's some cool footage of a big buck or a big elk or whatever. And we didn't finish the job. We just, I made a liver shot and waited 8 hours through the night. And when I came back, I had a deer get eaten completely. I'm talking every scrap of meat off that thing by coyotes, And so,
was that in Kansas?
Yes. And people do not like seeing that. I'll tell you that right now. There's been some raging folks on that video. And I didn't like seeing it. It was hard for me to walk, when I saw the deer, I saw it from like 100 yards away, kind of down into this little, draw or whatever. And I knew immediately that I wouldn't get any meat off this deer. And the deer, I have no question that the deer died from my liver shot before the coyotes ate it, because it was in one spot, completely picked clean. There was no no signs of struggle, no hair everywhere or nothing, but still, it's just like, I have so much respect for the animals, man, and the creation, and like those that deer in particular was really, really old. Like, I have thoughts that he's at least 12 years old. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I had a buddy actually shoot him like 3 years prior, and he was old then and hit high dead zone, and the deer lived through it. So, and just like the things they endure, man. And then when you make a bad shot and, this thing has been living in the wild in the cold, and everything else, and eating dirt pretty much for years and years of its life, and you wound it, it's not a good feeling, And I just kind of want people to know, like, they're not alone, and it's, we get a lot of, really, really rude comments on that kind of stuff. And it's like, it's taken a few years for us to like become okay with that being the case. It's hard when people come at you like that. It's something this is something I really, really love doing, and I really try hard to do well. So it's difficult. And I would imagine at times still weighs on us individually whenever we see a couple come through on our own personal video, so.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. What do you do about that? Right. Like, when we can pretend whatever we want, but when we do this stuff, we're checking in to nature in a way where we're just a part of it. And we're not like a perfect assassin. We're checking in as something that might make mistakes on this. Mm-hmm. Like, we might not do our job perfectly, and that's how that shit goes. And the losing things to coyotes, or losing deer to coyotes, man, like, that's just part of the game in some of these states. Like, there are places where you could leave a deer all night long. Like, let me put it this way: I've never lost a deer to coyotes ever. And the closest I ever came was in North Dakota last year. I hit one the night before and went out to try to find him, and I saw a coyote like running over to this corner, and he started. The only thing he ate was his balls. I got everything else, so I got really lucky. But what I'm saying is, like, some places this is like a real concern. You hear that in Kansas a lot. Yeah, like you just do. So. And they're out there covering ground, and they run across the scent of a wounded deer. Like they're going to get on it in some states. Like you just didn't do your job as well as you could. Like that's all that happens. And like when you think about how common it is to not make a perfect shot, like that's like our little secret. Like with all deer hunters or all big game hunters or all hunters in general, is like we don't make perfect shots a lot of the time. So what comes next is up to a lot of different variables, and that's one of them. And the people who I get why people are upset with that, but you're also looking at a cesspool of idiots in the comments there, and it's not a great place to be. And they weren't there. Like they didn't shoot it. They didn't have your gut reaction. They didn't have to make that game time decision of like, how long do we leave it? So it's like, well, like you tried, man. Like sometimes you lose, bro.
Dude, I can promise you, I try hard, man. I love doing this. I always have, man. Like, we released so the buck that I killed here at my homestead, I guess, last year. This is the first property that I've owned that I've been able to hunt on and hunted on, and this has literally been a dream of mine since I started deer hunting at like 9 years old, and I mean, having my own property, it used to be that I wanted a property in South Texas, I wanted a brush country property, and, cause that was where I killed my first deer, was in South Texas on a 100-acre low fence place, down there or whatever. And ever since then, I've been just fascinated with that country, but, we did a film out of this, like not just a video, but like the film is literally 100 minutes, it's an almost hour 40. And I didn't know like if people would really watch it, and listen. I did a couple of monologues, an intro monologue, and I talk about all this, and but like in that film, like I think people could really connect with what I was saying and how much it means to me. And I think it got to show a side to people that maybe a lot of people don't see in the YouTube world, because everything is so glamorous and quick and, just radical and whatever it has to be to get attention. But that video is actually done really well, man. And I mean, the retention on it, people may not care to hear this, but like we have like out of 100 minutes, we're getting like 50-minute average view time. So that includes people that start the video and go, oh, I didn't know this was deer hunting or whatever, and they click off in 3 seconds. And so it's pretty wild that like people will sit in and watch something like that and listen to me kind of tell my story. And I think hopefully they get to see how much truly I've loved deer hunting since I was young, when I used to just draw deer every time I drew something. I mean, it's just, I don't know what it is about deer, but I have realized in the last year that like I've always been fascinated with them. It's not something that I just have pursued in the last couple of years because I feel like I can do video well and I think I can make some money at it. Like this is something I absolutely love doing, Yeah.
Well, I think I think, you got little kids. You see this with little kids, and I think we forget this, but I think we're really drawn to mystery. Like I think we like surprises, and I think as you become an adult, you sort of fight this battle of like, if I have realistic expectations, I know what's coming, there's no bad surprises. There's nothing that's going to, take me out. It's just kind of like consistent, boring bullshit. But we lean toward it. And then you go do something like deer hunting. And the coolest thing is when that buck walks over the ridge and you're like, I've never seen him before. Or like when I think that one of the coolest things about all this stuff, whether it's smallmouth fishing or pheasant hunting or hunting deer, is sometimes when you go out there, you're like, I have no faith I'm going to see a deer, or I have no faith I'm going to catch a good smallie or shoot a pheasant. And when it breaks your way, it's like, even though you've done it, dozens of times or hundreds of times or maybe thousands of times, it's still like, I cannot believe that just happened. Like when you show up at a new place and you're like, I read the maps, I looked at OnX, I walked in here, and you sat there, and all of a sudden you look up and he's walking down the trail. It's like, holy balls. That's an amazing gift that we have. And I think it really keeps us like inspired to just like that's like a self-feeding thing too. The more that you just allow yourself to be like, I'm going to be in a position where like, if this breaks a little bit my way, it's freaking awesome. And if you go kill one, that's like a game changer, but it doesn't have to get to that level to be really, really good for you.
Yeah, dude, you nailed it. I mean, like Casey always says, you have to give amazing a chance to happen, So it's kind of the whole concept of like, can't kill him from the couch, or whatever. So, but like I had the same thing happen, man, in Kansas about a week and a half ago. And, I had been hunting hard, a buck on my dad's lease up there. And I haven't hunted. He usually, I've always had a spot on his lease. I'm kind of the low man on the totem pole because he always, lets me hunt out there. And so I don't try to step on anybody's toes. I don't want to hunt anybody's deer. And they want to shoot big deer, so they try to shoot 5-year-old plus deer. And so this year, my dad didn't draw because everybody saw Chris B's video last year and wanted to go shoot deer in Kansas. So they all applied, and my dad didn't draw a tag for the first time in like 20 years, And so there was only a couple guys hunting on the lease even this year. And so I was like, well, there's not going to be many deer taking off the place this year. I'm going to go hunt this big 11 point that we've been watching for, since I got video of him in 2017, the first year KC and I ever hunted Kansas together, and KC took video of him. And he's big. Hunted him for days and days. I was sick, man. I got food poisoning, I think, up there, and it was miserable. And I've literally hunted 10 days up there. And then we get a wind. All right, we spook him one morning, rattled him in, spook him at like 70 yards. It was a long story, but I was just like beat down. I was like, man, I don't know what to do. The wind's gonna be terrible tomorrow too for him, so can't really hunt him. And so I was like, I'm gonna go over to a piece of public and just see, as the slogan goes, see what happens, And so I went over and my cameraman and I actually split up because there's 2 drainages on this place, and we were gonna watch them both. And the 3 does and a big buck work into the top of this canyon like 3/4 of a mile away, right after the sun kind of starts hitting the landscape. And long story short, we snuck in on this deer, and I killed him at 50 yards from the ground, which I've never shot over 40. And I just knew, I told myself, if I'm going to shoot this shot, I know how far he is. I need to focus. And my pen does not need to be floating around. And so it all happened out to where it was that way. I spent a lot of time holding on him when I was at full draw. But when I shot him, it's literally, I'm talking dead nuts in the heart at 50 yards. And he had no clue, dude. He comes back down the trail at me and like gets to like 30. And I didn't know for sure it was hard. I knew it was kind of low. And so I'm like trying to knock another arrow. I get it knocked. I clip on. I look up, and he's literally closer than when I shot him. He's at like 40 yards, and he's stumbling, and he falls and crashes right there. And I just turned to my cameraman, Eric, and like tackled him, like form tackle, dude. I was just like, it's like you say, like when something like that happens, you just don't, like every time I stalk a deer, I go, this won't happen. And me and Casey will just laugh and stuff, like we're just out there, like we'll be 60 yards from a deer and we're laughing, because we're like, this ain't gonna happen. We're just telling jokes and stuff. And that's how I was on that one. And then literally, we're sitting 50 yards from him in the grass while he's bedded, waiting on him to stand up. And in 10 seconds, my whole season changes. Just a massive deer goes down at 40 yards. And it's like you said, it's like the most amazing thing, dude. Like when something like that happens and it surprises you, man. And that surprise, like you said, is something that I do think we crave, man. And it's to see something new and amazing happen. It's such a blessing, man. It's awesome.
It is. I mean, I had the filming this series for us here, that big one I killed in Minnesota. I mean, I was sitting there thinking, like, how long is my cameraman going to make it? Because it was so cold, and I was just like, I just didn't have that much faith. And I'm like, I would have shot a 100-incher, and then you have an awesome buck run in, and 6 days later, I'm sitting there in a stand and had made a lot of mistakes in the last few days, and it's like 1:00 in the afternoon, 60 degrees during the rut, and you're like, I don't know, man. Like, I've never killed a midday cruiser before, and you look up on the hill, and here he comes, and it's just like, no way, like no way.
Yep.
But where else? I always think about this, like, as an adult, like in your life, like where else can you get that? Like, where else can you get something like this? Like, there aren't very many places for that. And it's the same thing. Like when you talk about the adrenaline dump you get after doing what you did there on that buck, it's like, how many things can you do? Like, how many freaking avenues does an adult man have to get that feeling? Like, they're not that many. Like, unless you want to really risk your life doing something, and we don't. Like I don't want a cage fight. I don't want to jump off of like buildings with squirrel suits on. Like, there's only so many routes for a guy like me. And I think it's amazing that we have that. Like, it's such a gift.
It is, man. You're 100% right, man. Like, it's the instance of that happening for us is really cool. And I think that what we run into is like once you get out of college, you just like culturally here in America, we're expected to get a job, right? And so, which I didn't do. I went touring and making no money, and I'm still poor. And but I have good experiences, man. Like I get to do some awesome stuff, and I definitely am blessed with lots of opportunities and have a different situation. I didn't. I can't even say like I'm not. My situation is different. Like there's people that they did have to get a job as soon as they got out of high school or whatever, because their whole family for generations has been broke people. And so like I am truly blessed, man. Not that I have like money in my family, but I did know that like if something happened, that I had family members and people that would help me out. I didn't want that to happen. And luckily I never got to, I mean, I'll be honest, man, I've sat in my driveway at the first house that I ever bought going, I can't pay the mortgage this month. And I'm literally in tears in my driveway, and I'm like, I got to find a job. I got to do something. And I just, luckily I've made it through, man. I wanted to always provide for myself, my family, but I did know that I had other family members that take care of me. So I just want to like clarify that. It's like, my situation is not as desperate as some people's in America, right? But like as an American, generally, we are expected to get a job. And when you get your job, like you said, we like we kind of gravitate towards this whole, if you have a 9-to-5 and it pays for, you live within your means, then generally as Americans, we like convenience too. And everything's pretty convenient, other than maybe traffic when you're coming home from work. Like you can go get fast food if you need to. You can go to the grocery store. We got clean water. We got a trash system that keeps all the trash out of the streets and out of the, like it's the best place in the world to live. And so we kind of get into this groove where like, we like that. We like the convenience. We like a bed to sleep in at night, and you're right. Like nothing really amazing happens when you just kind of do the same thing every day, typically. And there's not many avenues for us to find that kind of adrenaline unless you, like you said, you jump out of planes or you're a drug addict or something, maybe. I don't know. But like, that would be the only, like, there's only a few things. And like you said, you don't want to risk your life. And pretty much, if you're fairly safe going up into a tree, like you're pretty safe deer hunting, and you're actually doing something that gets you just so hyped, man. That's fairly safe. It's cool, man. It's as good as it gets.
So is it safe to say the Element boys aren't driving around in Lamborghinis and using ivory back scratchers at home?
No, KC slept in the bed of his truck all week last week, and we've spent a lot of time. My cameraman, Eric, actually just sleeps on the ground in the tent when we go places. I'm like, dude, I have an air mattress, and he's like, no, I'll be all right. I got a comforter. I'm like, no, that's not okay. Like you need to be on this air mattress. He's like, no, I'm good, man.
Well, how old is he?
He's 31.
Oh, he's too old for that shit.
Oh, definitely, dude.
I thought you were going to say like 20.
Yeah, no. We had a 20-year-old last year, and I would say a 31-year-old just has a little more responsibility about himself typically, generally speaking. And Eric is just awesome, dude. But like, yeah, he's very he doesn't need much, and that's I mean, to really roll around with us, you kind of have to be that way a little bit. It's just um it's not always fun. There are moments that it's just like college football, man. Like you go out, I played, I mean, I've told you that before. And you go out 12 to 14 times a year and have the coolest experience that you can have. Your nerves are going, it's like shooting a deer, right? You're like almost shaking before kickoff. You kind of get into the groove, but like there are thousands of people there and maybe even millions on TV, depending on if you're on ESPN or whatever. It's insane, dude, for like 13 days. And then there's 320 days outside of that you're literally like trying not to throw up because you're working out and you got homework, but you also have to do an hour and a half of film study with your individual group. And, what people don't see is that. And the same thing with music, right? Like they don't see you drive 8 hours from the night before to your next venue and set up for 2 hours, sound check and all that, and then go eat some crappy food and, go into a dirty hotel room and get, if you're lucky, and get dressed. And then, what they see is the 90 minutes you're on stage having, an awesome time. And it looks like so glamorous, but there are definitely moments, and same thing in traveling and hunting, that I didn't want to go out the other day in Colorado when it was 8 degrees and the wind chill was, 0 or whatever. But, kind of feel obligated to do. We're spending money, business money on tags and stuff, and gas. So kind of feel obligated to. If I was hunting just for fun, I might have missed that morning. I might have just stayed in I might have drove around and tried to, scout deer from the truck, but instead I got out on the ground and did some stuff, So there are things, but I mean, I literally can't complain because this is the dream job that I would have, man. Like since I was 9 years old, I wanted to deer hunt and for a living. I didn't know I'd be on YouTube or whatever, but I knew that like that was something I wanted to do, and it's a dream. It literally is a dream,
Yeah. When you bring up those three examples of playing college football, playing in a band, being a musician, and then doing this, creating hunting content specifically around public land, whitetails, what you're saying is you just kind of learned the things that take a lot of work are the things that are worth the most. Like you said it without saying it. And I think that's the greatest message out there with this public land movement is by showing people that this can be done, by you going and showing up in Illinois or Kansas or somewhere and killing a big one, you show people that this is doable. Like, like this is something within your purview. Like this is in your grasp. Like you can do this, and it inspires people to get out there. Like I think that's the hunting public does a great job of that too. Like I think it's really important for people to understand that whether they actually aspire to be a public land killer or not. Like you can see, even if you don't acknowledge it, you can see that like, there has to be some work here. Like you're taking these people who are not. They're not writing huge checks to hunt somewhere. They're sleeping in freaking tents. They're hunting on over-the-counter tags or tags that you can draw, and they're just dedicated to the process, and they're going to see it through to the end. And you do that enough, and you kill good deer in places where you're technically not supposed to, or like where theoretically like it should be really, really hard, but it can be done. And we're seeing people show this all over the place. And I think it's the same thing, like on a way smaller scale. Everybody loves dogs, right? Like people who don't love dogs are sociopaths. We don't want to hang. It's the same thing as people who don't love music. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Anyway, when you love hunting dogs, working dogs, everybody has the best dog. Everybody's dog is the best dog ever. Like we all own the number one, But then you get around a dog that's been trained really, really well and has a good working relationship with its owner and is out there on that team thing, and it's doing its job in a way that you maybe have never seen before. You go, whoa, Like now I know what they're capable of. Like I had something awesome already. Now that I see this, I go, this could be even better. But there's a lot of work there. Like there's a lot to build in to have that end result, but it's worth it. It's worth it not only for the end result, but how you feel through that process. And I literally don't think we have a better opportunity for that for a lot of us than just going out and challenging ourselves with deer.
Yeah. Oh, 100%, man. That's you know, like you mentioned being dedicated to the process, and that's a huge point for people to think about here when it comes to this, because I know for us, something Casey and I talk about a lot is that, like you said, everybody thinks they hunt the hardest place, but I've hunted a lot of states now, and I do know that East Texas has been very difficult to hunt for us. And one thing that we have is smaller deer. They make less sign. We see less rubs. We see less scrapes. The trails are made by 140-pound deer instead of 240-pound deer. Like the sign is just less, and the trails are less. And so, like, I can remember when I first started hunting with KC. He's, like I said earlier, he's very observant. And so, like, he helped me to really start to understand sign even better and, like, locate sign even better, really. And so, but I can remember we started out hunting here locally, and he would go, "Oh, there's a trail right there." And I would be like, I've been hunting in Kansas or something. And I'm like, "That's not a trail. I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy." And now I see it, like several years later, I've been able to see what he's talking about. And, there's not a high population either. It's not high density. So there's just not a lot of signs. So what we've kind of noticed, we think at least, is that hunting here and kind of cutting our teeth on public land here has made us better hunters other places. So, like, if you're listening and you're from, Florida or Alabama or something like that, where things are a little bit different, or Louisiana or whatever, that's something that could kind of give you some confidence, maybe, is to know that, like, this is a place that is tough to hunt. If I can learn to hunt here, then I can apply a lot of these things that deer generally do in other places and really start to figure things out pretty well in other places, And part of the reason we travel to Illinois or something like that, or Iowa, is because there's big deer and the sign's a little bit easier to read. Now, there are things like, night sign and, what sign is relevant, what sign is hot, and stuff like that. You start to have to, you run into issues with that when you go to Iowa, and you're like, dude, there are scrapes and rubs everywhere. Like, what do I do with this? It's too much. It's overload. But the thing that I do see is that we kind of have that going for us. But I guess what I'm trying to track back to is the point where you said falling in love with the process or being dedicated to the process is very important, because it took us a few years to kind of find our groove of hunting and filming and trying to find, good close encounters where you kill deer. And I think we're seeing it pay off a little bit, but a lot of guys, man, we get a ton of people that send us messages or whatever, and they're like, man, I just struggled so much this year. I haven't had hardly any good encounters. I don't know. I'm trying to kill a doe, and I can't even kill a doe, And I think that what we're seeing is there's a lot of accessibility in this public hunting movement. So guys are getting, well, and also through the coronavirus stuff, like we've seen this kind of, a lot of people talk about like maybe a hipster movement or something like that, where people are starting to get into hunting for the first time. And we have, Eric, our cameraman, he's only been hunting a couple of years, and another one of our cameraman producer kind of guys that works with us as well, named Chris. I mean, he wears black skinny jeans into the woods. I mean, that is what he wears. So, and literally he wore the little, like, they're like boots, but they're like that tall. As for people who can't hear me, it's like see me, it's like 4 inches, like it's the hipster boot, That's what he wears into the woods. And he's a fairly new hunter. He grew up in the Dallas metro area and didn't hunt. And, his dad's an accountant. And, that's the life he lived until the last couple of years. And you find this like sustainability movement, right? And so what I think people are getting maybe a little, what could be confusing to them is it does look easy. Like you said, sometimes we have these highlight reels that look easy, right? But it's not. It's not easy. And I've been hunting since I was tiny, and KC has too, dude. KC probably started hunting before I did, and He's a year younger. So we probably have, 50 years of combined experience between us. And like I said in the beginning, we're bouncing 50 years of experience off of each other the whole time. And if you're kind of a hipster dude that's been hunting for 2 years now, you just can't expect that you're going to have a whole lot of success, So just like fall in love with the process of learning how to get encounters, how to get closer to deer, what sign means and stuff, and learn from these people. Learn from Tony, learn from you, man. Learn from Mark and some of the people there at Meat Eater, and learn from the hunt public, and learn, hopefully from us. We try to put a lot of content out there that teaches people how to read maps and what we see when we go boot scouting and stuff, So just dive into that and understand that there may be some moments early on that you are very bored in the stand and things are not going your way, but it takes that to get through it, and you have to be dedicated to the process, like you said.
Yeah. Let's clear this up. You don't have to, we're not against hipsters here. You can.
No. I love Chris. I love him, man.
Yeah. I don't want to offend anybody in Bozeman specifically with this podcast. Yeah. But here's the thing about what you just said. I see this a lot. I think there's two things that the hunting industry did very poorly that we're still suffering from today, and we may suffer from until hunting is freaking gone. One is we made it look too easy to kill big bucks. We set an unrealistic standard that's just stupid. It's like, you could probably compare it to like, I know we don't watch network television a ton now, but when you were growing up, when I was growing up, there were sitcoms on, and there'd be like this fat dad bod dude with a supermodel wife every time. Like, it's not real. Like what you're seeing, that doesn't exist. Like, unless that dude started Microsoft or something, doesn't happen. Yeah. So we did that, and we're still suffering from it today. We're suffering from it maybe more than ever now because we have social media and we can see every 200-inch buck that's ever killed ever. And the other thing is we convince people they can look at bucks and age them. So everybody thinks that they can just read a buck on the hoof and go, that one's 2.5, that one's 4.5. I'm telling you, we cannot do that. And the people who think they can are lying to themselves. This is not an easy thing to do. Wildlife biologists cannot do it. Some random dude who's killed 3 bucks definitely can't do it. But the problem here is with those two things, and now we have this public land movement, people go, well, I'm going to go out and do that. And I know that you see this a lot, and I see this too. I think the thing holding a lot of people back is their expectations, their standards are way too high for their experience level. And I don't want to sound like a dick there because I don't mean it that way. But like, you wouldn't, like, if you and I got together and played guitar, people would be like, Tyler's a lot better than Tony. Like, I wouldn't show up and expect to play like you can't, because I know I cannot. Like, I just know, even though we maybe have been playing the same amount of time, I guarantee you've put in so much more to that pursuit than I have, without question. So if I showed up and I was like, I'm going to be like him, it wouldn't happen. When you're talking about hunting, like, maybe you have hunted 30 years, but is it 3 weekends a season? Or is it, are you living in a tent for 40 days and hunting public land and challenge? Like, there's a big, like, it varies a lot. And I see a lot of people bring in somebody else's standards to this. And, I know this happens to you all the time. It happens to me too, where people reach out and be like, I'm hunting this shooter and I got pictures of him on this public land, but I haven't seen him yet. And I'm really frustrated. And here's my stand. What do I do? And it's like a screen grab. I'm like, what do you expect me to do with this, man? Like, I can't stand that stuff because I can't help you, there's way too much missing here. And I always get this vibe, not always, but 93% of the time, I'm like, you probably shouldn't be just targeting that caliber of buck yet. Like, you don't seem like you're there yet. And I know, like, it's a hard thing for us guys specifically to do. You do see women in the industry doing it now too. But man, like, recognizing that, okay, well, maybe on grandma's farm, I can hold out for 140s. But if I travel out of state and I'm hunting public land for the first time and I can't go climb into my ladder stand on my food plot, that's a different thing. Mm-hmm. Like, you go buy that saddle and you want to go mobile wherever, like, okay, but you're not at the same level you were at home. Like, and I think that that's danger ground there.
Yeah, no, I hadn't even thought about the age thing, man. That's definitely something. So there are some forums, I'm not going to name them, and then some Facebook groups that I'm a part of. I'll say they're Texas based groups. And, this is where quality deer management started here in Texas, right? So, dude, the number one post in November that you'll see is a picture of a buck, and it'll say age and score. And it's comical, dude. I mean, it literally, because for one, Texas, it takes you 15 hours to drive across Texas. So you're talking about some deer can weigh 250, and then there's deer that are, if they weigh 150, that's a nice sized buck, in certain parts of Texas. So, who even knows where this guy's hunting? No telling what the age of this deer is. He could be 3 or he could be 7, there's no telling. And so I hadn't really thought about that as being an issue, but I'd have thought about what you said about the expectations thing. And we talk about it a lot on our podcast. And I'll be frank, when we go to South Dakota, I am all about shooting a 1.5-year-old buck. If that's it, dude, there's so many deer there, and I wouldn't say like it's maybe the biggest buck state or whatever. There's nice bucks there too. We saw a giant come through camp when we were there this year, but like I'm going there to have a good time in the early season when it's nice weather. And frankly, dude, if I can shoot like a 6 or 8 point buck and then go shoot sharptails or pheasant, I would be, because I've told you this before, I love deer hunting so much, but I think I like shooting a shotgun better than I like deer hunting probably. Like and that would be like, clay targets are fun, but at any winged animal, I love shooting a shotgun. And it's one of my things that I grew up doing nonstop in high school. And I feel like probably do better than I do anything else is shoot a shotgun. And so it's so much fun, dude. I love shooting birds. I love that surprise we were talking about earlier when a bird gets out of the grass, man. And it's just the best. So like when I go to South Dakota, I'm trying to shoot a small buck. I've been hunting 25 years, and like I shot a probably 1.5-year-old 8 point last year and was stoked, dude. I'm talking, it's, and that's where setting your expectations is key. I mean, I don't go to Kansas or, I was in Colorado last week, and I don't go there thinking I'm going to shoot a 1.5-year-old deer. I'm absolutely not going to do that. That's just what I've chosen to do. But you got to set your expectations based off of either your experience or your experience level or like the place that you are, I think. So it's definitely key.
And, the one thing about that too, because I'll shoot a little one all day long in a lot of different places. I got a spread, man. And
dude, I love it. You'll send me pictures all the time with like, not huge deer. And I can just tell you're so proud of it. And it has to do with that work that you put in, and like what when it came down to when you made the decision, and I'm like, dude, you can just tell, dude, you're just happy when you send those pictures,
Well, and I am. And the thing that I know people don't believe this, but I don't have like a place where I could just go hunt and kill does. Or I don't have like a guaranteed place to go shoot deer. Like I have private properties I can hunt. I have lots of public land I go hunt, but I've got limited amount of time, and I love the experience of traveling and hunting public land. So that's most of my hunting. And you know how it is. Like sometimes you go into a state and you're like it's the right time. I got 3 in the freezer already. Like I'm gonna be picky. Sometimes you just go in hungry. Sometimes you go and you're like, this is gonna be awesome, and for whatever reason, it sucks every day, and you can't get on anything. And then you have one start walking in that previous to the hunt, you're like, there's no way I would shoot that. And then you get into a real hunting situation and that deer starts walking in. You're like, I want to kill that buck bad. Yeah. And I love, and I have a lot of respect for people who can go out and just like stick to their guns. I'm not like that. Like I'm an in the moment kind of guy. And I just learned over time, like if I don't end the season with a bunch of deer in the freezer, I feel like I'm a failure. Like I don't like that. Like I would rather have that than anything else at this point in my life. And like we talked about earlier, man, like you go to a state like South Dakota, if you can go crawl around and stalk bucks, that's like, what's more fun?
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, it's the best.
and you know what's not fun is going in with that mentality. This happens to a lot of first time mule deer hunters is they go, I just want to go glass up a good, 140, 150, 160 and, stalk them. And I'm like, okay, if you're on an over the counter tag on public land, you might get a chance. Like you can find big mule deer if you know what you're doing. But the odds of you making good on that one stock that week are almost zero. And you might spend a ton of time on the glass or driving around, not really hunting because you think that this is where it's got to be. And like, hey, you do you, but when you know how it is, when you go out and do this stuff, like I want to hunt, like I want to go out there and be with them. And I want to get my chance to try to time my draw and make my shot and see if I can do this shit right. And you got to do the whole process to get there.
Yeah. That's like, with antelope, like I don't know what a big antelope is or whatever, like they all look big to me. So we'll be driving down the road and I'm like, man, I got to do that someday. I got to try to do that. And I have a few points. I think I got a point in Wyoming, but like I've always said that like when it comes to an antelope, especially, but even I think about this with like deer and elk as well, because I feel like when I'm elk hunting, I feel like I'm in the middle of the day. I feel like I'm just walking around the woods, just being so unproductive, Yep. Like I'm not hunting anything, like I feel like I'm not hunting is what I feel like. I feel like I'm just in the mountains being a hipster to say the least.
Wearing your skinny jeans.
That's right. But so I've always said this about antelope. I'm like, man, I don't really care to kill a big one. I just want to make sure I'm scouting or stalking antelope all day. You know what I mean? I just want to, if I bust one, I want to be able to like go down the road, regroup, get something to eat, and find some more to stalk. And I just want to go where there's a bunch of them. And that's just what you're saying is like, I want to be hunting. I want to feel like I'm in the game. I don't like walking around in the thick timber of Colorado, not knowing what's going on for days on end, So that's a struggle for me. And that's why I don't do many all day sits. And I actually did my first one in a long time, maybe I don't know if I did an all day last year, but I did one in Colorado last week. And the magical thing of deer cruising through in the middle of the day did not happen. And so it was pretty boring. But like I'm more of the type that'll like find a way. I'll be sitting in the stand in the morning, late morning, and instead of doing an all day hunt, I would rather just like come up with a good plan on my map and think, oh, deer are going to do this afternoon, so let's go move the stands. And I'd rather just break the whole thing down and go find, even if I got to move 100 yards or whatever, at least I did something in the middle of the day, gave me something to do, and I feel like I'm hunting instead of just sitting there waiting on things to happen,
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, like I can wait in a stand. I'm not the guy that has to be on the ground all the time like some of these guys. They don't like hunting in tree stands, but I try to have some patience, but the all day thing is not my favorite. That's for sure.
It's tough. You got to have some confidence, man, like real confidence.
Yeah.
And you got to recognize like, all right, do I believe in this? Cause I think it's going to happen, or do I just not want to go to a plan B? And it's hard, man. Or to not talk yourself out of just going into town for lunch. Like I struggled with that with all day sits for a long, long time. Actually, what got me over the hump was dedicating myself to killing like public land longbeards with a bow, where you're just like, it's such a pain in the ass to move a blind and decoys and your chair and all your stuff. Like if you're bow hunting turkeys without, if you're not doing the ghillie suit thing or whatever, like it's a freaking gear intensive, it sucks a lot of times. And so it's like, you better really find a good spot and ride it out. And when you do like dark to dark sits for turkeys, on those days in the spring, it's like, man, sitting in a tree stand for whitetails for 11 hours versus like 16 hours for turkeys.
Yeah.
It's not so bad, but it takes the right mindset, and it takes, you got to be really confident to know when you should actually be pulling the plug. And it's like, that's a learned thing, and you have to learn yourself, right? Like you said, if it's something that's really not your thing, like if you learn that, okay, don't do it then. But learn how to be out there and keep your time productive, because that's important.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like there are people like if you the whitetail adrenaline guys, like those guys, they do it a certain way, and that lends itself to guys who have done it that way and had success. But that way that they do it does not lend itself to guys that haven't done it. Like if you haven't done it that way, then and you want to, you better be dedicated to the process, like we said earlier. Because it's tough to kill deer from the ground on public land, all the time with a longbow or whatever. And so all the stipulations you put on yourself, are challenges that you can give yourself, but there are also ways to either have more fun or just, especially if you're kind of a newer hunter or something, to lend yourself to something that fits your style a little better, And so everybody has a different style, and there are guys like we got a friend that is a killer, man. He kills a deer on public in East Texas, every year pretty much, good deer. And he's like the type that's like, if the wind changes direction, just turn around and look into the wind, He's like, he will sit there, in the same spot and ride it out and kills a buck, like a good buck every year, man. I mean, he's a better hunter than me, I would say. And that's the way he does it. And I cannot do that, right now at least. So, and maybe that's me being, naive or inexperienced or whatever, but I just feel like, there are definite styles that people have, or characteristics and personality traits that people have that lend themselves to a certain style. And so you just kind of gotta figure out what that is. And like I said earlier, it's not always fun, but if you got to balance success and fun. And so how much success are you hard after? You probably should have a little less fun. And if you want to have the most fun, you may not have quite as much success, but it's okay. Have fun, you know what I mean? So if that's what your goal is, then do it, So those things kind of work inversely, I think, a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. And you make a really interesting point there about if you take the Whitetail Adrenaline guy's style, or maybe a Dan Infalt style, and you talk about your own style, you've got enough experience in this to know this is what I like doing. This is probably what I'm going to do. And this is what's going to make me the happiest. Mm-hmm. That's no small thing. So when people are trying to emulate somebody else's style, that's a good thing to try. Go try to be Zach Fehrenbaugh if you want. Go ahead. Might be your thing. It might not. But the more stuff you try, your example with the stalking antelope, if you want to prove yourself a real bow hunter, go shoot a bunch of public land antelope with your bow, spot and stalk. Don't do it out of a blind. Don't do it with a decoy. Yeah. Just go show me that you can go sneak up on those suckers. You'll learn a lot about yourself. You'll learn what you're capable of, patience-wise, planning a stock-wise, hunt-wise. You'll learn on day 3, 4, if this is still your thing or not. There's a lot to that. But when you start getting more experiences like that, you start finding out this is what I really like and this is what I don't like. And I'm telling you, instead of just leaning into what's easy, if you lean into what you like, you'll work harder at it and you'll kill more deer. And so you take, your examples with the Whitetail Adrenaline guys, they're doing what they're good at. They've honed a skill, Dan Infalt hunting, buck beds. He's honed that skill over, decades. That's important to acknowledge. You could go out and try that. You might be successful. You might not, but it might be the most amazing thing to you. Or you might go, I don't like this. I don't want to go walk through the swamps and scout for these beds. I want to go do something else. And when you learn that about yourself, even though you'll be going away from a successful strategy for some people, you'll be finding something that's better for you. And man, you want a crash course in this stuff, go figure out a way to hunt new places. And I'm not even talking just necessarily out of state. Your point about East Texas is such a good one, right? You're talking about how hard it is, and then you got a guy out there who's going to kill big ones. What's his secret? What's he doing? And then you think about somebody in Florida, or you mentioned Louisiana, northern Wisconsin. You can find places close to you that are going to be different than what you're used to, and it's going to be shitty at first. It's not going to be as much fun, but if you start the scouting process and you start the process of figuring this stuff out, it'll probably get fun, and it'll probably show you ways where you can enjoy the work and the discipline and the process much more, even though it might not seem that appealing. just as an example, I'm like obsessed with northern Wisconsin because it kicks my ass. I hate it. I love it and I hate it. Right? Like I got a weird relationship with that place. Like I'm going to kill big ones there at some point, and I spend more time scouting there in the winter, and it's like become this thing that just drives me. Like I don't feel good at this stuff when I'm there. And I don't like that feeling, but I love the process of just being like, okay, well, I know it's going to be different this year because there's going to be, a new wolf pack somewhere. There's going to be a new 4-wheeler trail somewhere. There's going to be something going on that changes things for me. And I have to start over, but it teaches me like, even though you kind of like outwardly hate this, like you keep coming back for a reason. Like, it's like I have a bad relationship, like, my partner sucks, but I'm going to keep giving it another shot. And you learn about yourself that way. And like you said before, if you go do that stuff, like when you guys are hunting East Texas, man, I bet it's pretty easy to go appreciate South Dakota. Like I bet it's pretty easy to appreciate a lease in freaking Kansas after you're hunting that stuff. That's important.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, that's you make some really good points, but like there are, like I said, pretty much everywhere you can find something new pretty close to you. So, I mean, for us, we're about 70 miles east of Dallas right here. And so if we were to hunt like real close to home, we have a certain type of habitat. It's post oak, old prairie or whatever. And if we go basically from here, if we go like 20 miles to the west, we start turning into a little bit more black soil and shorter trees, less oaks, more locust trees, hackberries, stuff like that. And then you work into Dallas, and there's obviously this massive concrete jungle there. And when you get around that, it's mesquite trees, and it's more red dirt and stuff like that. And so, like, that's 2 hours from us, If you go to the east, 20 miles, we've got pine trees, and it's the start of literally the South. You know what I mean? It's pine tree country. And I think that kind of thing happens all over America, I would assume. Maybe not necessarily 20 miles, but, you could drive an hour and find bluffs or find flat farmland or, find river bottom country or whatever, And so you don't have to go from Texas to South Dakota to challenge yourself with a new type of deal and to give yourself an opportunity to find out what you enjoy the most, and you can take that stuff and relate it across the country. So if you end up, like for us, if we end up like finding success in the river bottoms and really enjoying that here in East Texas, I mean, I can go a lot of places and find river bottom type habitat. I mean, it's weird, but like Iowa kind of looks like where we live. It's, it's just a little bit bigger oaks, and, lots of creeks and draws and stuff, and so, you can kind of take that and go across the country. And also one thing that KC always talks about is that, he says deer do deer things. And so like there are characteristics and habits that deer have that are those characteristics and habits because they're deer, not because of where they live. And so you take those and apply them across the country. And we try to do that. That's, I think, been a big kind of breakthrough of mine just to help me with finding success and take those things and go and understand, for instance, just quick little example. If you're following a fence and the top string sags down in one little section of that fence, the deer are going to cross there if that's the lowest by 6 inches place in a 300-yard stretch or whatever. It's fairly simple. It sounds like, whatever, but those are the things that you can carry, that you find out while you're hunting, that you can carry across the country and use to your advantage,
Man, that's such a good point. And one of the things I would say on that is not only do you learn that's 100% true when you go hunt a lot of different stuff, you see the similarities. You also realize that we carry a lot of baggage with us that's not true about our deer. And yeah. I'll use this as an example. One of my really good buddies, I met him tournament fishing. We hunt together a lot. He's a great guy. And I took one of my daughters to Lake Mille Lacs here in Minnesota. Mille Lacs is like world renowned for smallmouth, right? It's it's incredible. It gets a lot of pressure, crystal clear, but the bass are freaking awesome. And it was supposed to be dead calm, which is the reason I went there, because it's this huge 20-mile wide bowl, and if it's windy, it sucks bad. Sucks way too much for my boat. Well, we got there, and it was really windy right at sunrise, and I'm like, man, like, we're gonna go just try this anyway. And I got out there, and it was one of those things where I was like having trouble controlling my boat with the trolling motor. And so I'm standing on that, and I grabbed a rod that had a swimming jig on it and threw it out there and caught a smallmouth right away, totally by accident. And so I started throwing that, and they were just on this wind-beaten shore. They were eating something that looks like a moving minnow or a crayfish. Like, and in my head, I'm like, this is Mille Lacs. You got to throw little stuff and fluoro line, and you got to do these Mille Lacs-y things. And I was talking to my buddy about it. And he's like, what'd you catch him on today? I'm like, I caught him on a topwater, and I caught him on a swimming jig, just like I do on the Mississippi River and all these other lakes. And he's like, you caught Mille Lacs smallmouth on a swimming jig? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I guess they're just smallmouth. But in my head, I'm like, these fish need something different. And it, you see this with, you hear this a lot with like southern turkeys or whitetails, and certainly, like southern turkeys, an example. Like, well, you're never going to call in an Alabama turkey. Like, well, they're turkeys, right? Like, are you sure? Yeah. Like, are you sure you're going to stick to that statement? Like, well, but we bring in this stuff, and the more you travel and the more you hunt different spots, you realize, like, okay, some of these things I've been led to believe, they're not doing me any good. They're holding me back. And, if you take KC's mindset and you go, yeah, deer do what deer do. Okay, well, deer lay down where deer lay down. They walk where they walk. They eat where they eat. They try to have sex where they try to have sex. Like, you take these things and you go, okay, this is ubiquitous, man. This goes from East Texas up to Canada and wherever else. And you can use those things. Like, you can use all that stuff to make a good plan, and anything you bring with you that's like, well, the deer don't do this, or they're not going to move on a full moon, or they're not going to do this, that's holding you back. And I think we got to be real careful about that stuff.
Oh yeah, man, for sure. That's like we see, we do this series called Map Scout Challenge, where we started out getting spots from people. They would send us a spot that they would never go see and that they wanted to see. And so we said, we'll go video it and show you what's there, or whatever. So we went to Michigan this past summer and did a video up there. And, you got the, I'm sure there's a lot of truth to this, but the Michigan people are definitely the types that think that their deer hunting is the hardest in the world, So, sorry, Mark, if you're listening. But they do, and so like we went up there and hung a camera on public land and found like some good bucks. We had a buck the first night that nice solid 8 or whatever, probably 130 plus inch 10 point on there at some point, like good deer, and literally this is 60 yards off the road. I mean, so it's so close to the road. Like, we were so happy because they're like, yes, we're getting rid of some of these stereotypes for Michigan people. But, at the same time, it's all in good fun. But like, there were guys that were definitely like, oh, but you could never kill them. You got to be 30 foot high, and this and that. And they're always looking up, and these things that people, like you said, they get into their minds, and, think that, oh, those deer look up, It's like, man, not really. It's something in that habitat or something that allows them to see better into the trees or, whatever. It's not, deer don't walk around looking up, you know what I mean? They just don't. It's not what they do. I mean, there are places in the country that get more pressure, for sure. But dude, how many times has that deer actually been in close range of a human, seen it, and had to run off? Probably not like a ton. And does it even associate that with a true danger, or is it just an instinctual thing that a deer does when it sees something move that's an object that doesn't look like a deer? You know what I mean? I've seen deer run away from cows, the cow's not going to harm a deer. So, that, like, you're nailing it for sure, man. It's like we have to kind of have that open mind, like we talked about earlier when we were talking about hunting with a partner, right? You got to have an open mind and understand that you don't know everything. But there are things that you can know about deer. Like you said, they breed in a certain area or a certain way, a certain time of year. And there are biological things that we can think about when it comes to that. Also, the fact that there's only so much cold weather a deer can take. Doesn't matter where it is, but it is relative, right? I mean, I skinned out my buck from here at home last year, and it felt like I was skinning a rabbit compared to the other deer I had shot that year, because I shot an Illinois buck and a South Dakota buck, and it just has thinner skin. But, those cold temps are relative. So, like, what's the average temp in your area? Well, if it's below average temps that week, that deer's going to be moving more. It's going to eat food more to keep it warm, And so those are things that you can know. And most of them, I would say, probably have to do with, like, the biology of a deer. So, it's good to get to know, like, how do deer see? What is their vision like? Talk to Carl Miller about that one time on our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And, how does a deer, like, what time, what's the peak breeding, And is that, for a lot of guys, like, what is that? How does that compare to the peak movement and these things, And so, and then it gets finer and finer detailed, like we talked about earlier. But you can always take across the country the fact that deer like to go in fairly straight lines when they go places, and they're going to take easy paths when they can do that. Like I said, the cold factor is something, the time of year when it comes to, breeding and stuff like that, like you mentioned. So all those things really are biological things you can kind of carry across the country, man. It's a white-tailed deer,
Yeah. Well, and I want to back up a second. When you talk about deer looking up, one of the things that I noticed when I started hunting out west, they didn't look up. Like, it was amazing. I was like, these things are stupid. Like, I'm 10 feet up in a little tree. And then, like where I hunt in northern Wisconsin, they look up a lot. And I think it's just a pressure thing, but we have to be really careful. And, if you say, like, well, you can't kill them on a tree, they're going to see every time. Like, no, it's not like an infallible thing. Like, you can kill these deer. And so I always look at this, like, I almost expect to get busted over there in Wisconsin if I haven't done a really good job of facing away from where I expect them to come. And if I haven't really, really done a good job, I'm probably in a little bit of trouble. But I still kill a fair amount of deer that bust me drawn, and it's too late for them. And so we kind of use this stuff as an excuse to not do it, right? Like, to not get in a tree, or, like, if you think, well, I got to get in 30 feet in a tree, otherwise I'm going to get busted. Like, man, I bet there's another answer to that. Like, I bet that's not the only way to beat them. And okay, so can you sit on the ground and build a natural ground blind and, draw as you're coming up on your knees? There's ways around this stuff, but the things we believe as, like, always and never, we've heard that a lot. Like, that holds us back. And you kind of just shatter those things the more you go spend time out there looking for new opportunities. Cause you go, man, in my head, I was like, there's no way I'm going to kill a big buck this way. And just as an example, I've killed a fair amount of deer from the ground, but when I first dedicated myself to, I'm like, I'm going to go kill a public land buck. I'm going to kill a big one. I went out to North Dakota, and I was like, I'm going to get in a tree stand on the river. I'm going to shoot one when he walks by. And the buck that I had most pattern from scouting, I went in there, and the trees that I was going to sit in were like 15 times too big. They were these giant cottonwoods, So I was like, oh shit, like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, I'm just going to sit on the ground behind this tree and shoot him when he walks past. And that's what I did. And I was like, this is stupid. Like, this is not, there were times of, like, moments of, like, pure panic. Cause I'm like, I know these bucks are going to come down here and cross, and there's no way I can get up there where I would normally do that. So what do you do? And it's like, I don't know. They can't see through trees, and he's still going to be 20 yards away. Like, just there are other answers to these problems, but we kind of get it in our head. Like, we have to do this, or our deer are always going to do that, or there's no way this is going to work. And the more experience you get out there, the more you realize, like, there's a lot of gray area going on here. Like, there's a lot of things we can get away with. Yeah.
And I should have probably been more clear. Like, we get picked off a lot in East Texas. So, as opposed to, Kansas or whatever, South Dakota, like, we get picked off in East Texas a lot. And so I think that's the point to make, is that it's pressure dependent, kind of how high strung are those deer, how late in the season is it? And those are kind of factors that you have to think about. But like you said, like, you got to be creative, and you got to think of some way to get around that. It's in Colorado this past week. I I kind of worked in over the course of a few days. We were hunting really far back, so it was tough. It was a tough hunt, and we were hunting in this area. I started to really narrow down where I needed to be, but the deer were on this creek system, and the trees. I like killing deer out of trees because I just think I can see better. I can figure out what they're doing better from a tree because I can see them at 200 yards doing this and go, oh, I need to move over there. If I was from the ground, I might not even see a deer that evening or whatever. So like I learn from the tree usually. And I like to kill them because I feel like I can get drawn better from trees and without getting seen in most cases. And so we were starting to narrow down to like where we actually needed to be, which tree we actually need to be in the closest trail that I thought was so like basically on the south side of me was where I thought the majority of the deer movement would be. But I did have trails on the north side of me, but they were, all within 30 yards. They were close. And I thought the better trails were going to be on the south side, and they were. But the closest one was 45 yards. And I was like, oh, I just do not want to take that shot. It's so far. And so, but I was prepping myself mentally for like what that looks like. I don't want to shoot a deer that's on edge at 45. Like he needs to be calm and smelling something on that trail or whatever. And so I'm just kind of working through all this thing and thinking like, how can I make this work better? And you start to like really what it came down to is I went in there with this idea that the wind needed to be a certain direction for me to hunt that tree. And really figured out that it was kind of the opposite direction that worked best for the situation because I was able to blow my wind. Like I was able to get shots on deer downwind of me before they got to my wind, whereas I was just thinking I didn't want to blow it on those trails at all. And so, long story short, like sometimes you have to, like you said, keep your mind open, think about things as you go in, try to narrow down into the deer's, as a bow hunter, you got to try to narrow down into, the deer's lap pretty much. And then, once you get to the spot where you think you can encounter deer, like how do you like, what can you create that can get you drawn? You know what I mean? How can you get drawn? Because that's the moment of truth. It almost always boils down to, I mean, if you're hunting and you're a pretty decent hunter, it really just always almost seems to boil down to like, can you get drawn without getting seen? And we have to be creative a lot because I have to hang two stands a lot of times, for one for the cameraman as well. And so like sometimes we hunt in some pretty small trees and I'm like, okay, where do I put that platform? Like what side of the tree, like how do I keep my broadheads from beating right in his face while it's sitting there hanging on the tree or whatever, and all these things. So we spend a lot of time doing that, but you're 100% right. Like when it comes down to getting drawn, there's a way. You just have to figure it out, and sometimes it's using a big tree from the ground or whatever it might be. And we did a lot of different things. We hunted from the ground while we were out there and almost killed a deer from the ground. So, the being open-minded is big key, man.
Yeah, when you have another person with you, you really figure out. You figure out a couple things. Like you figure out the best way to do stuff because you have to, because it's way harder, and you figure out where you're just willing to make some concessions. And I did that. Filming for this 1 Week in November series. Man, it was a good reminder of why I hadn't filmed for a long time because it's just tough. But it forces you to think like, okay, if I'm here for my best shot, where do I put him to not get me busted? Or like it takes a lot of consideration. And you realize like let me tell you this story. So when my cameraman for that shoot showed up, the backpack he had to bring for our hunt, you could have put like a pretty decent sized adult man's body in there, I think. Like, I looked at that pack and I was like, is that like your luggage? And he's like, no, this is my camera pack. And it was black. So I'm like, and I was like, man, we're sitting all day. And he's like, yeah, I brought my sheep hunting pants. Well, they're like puffy. And I was like, bro, we're not rifle hunting here, man. This is close range stuff. And so you just go, I was positive. I talked to my buddy Eric about this. I was like, that pack is going to get us busted. I don't know how many times, but it's going to happen. And I don't know if it actually did. And I was confident of it. And what I realized is like, okay, we had some pretty good setups, obviously, but I was probably giving the deer a little bit too much credit. Like I was probably like, man, this is there, you know, because you get so cautious with this stuff. And like, I would never bring that into a tree. Like if you showed that to me, I would be like, you couldn't pay me to hunt with that. Yeah. And so, and I have my mind made up, like that's going to cost us. And I don't know if it actually ever did. I know having a cameraman with me cost me a couple opportunities, but it was like just run of the mill stuff that happens filming. It wasn't because of that. And it kind of was like, I was kind of like, man, I got that one wrong. Like I was sure that sucker was going to cost us, and I don't think it did. But you know, it's one of those things. Like, again, I brought something to the table as far as like maybe giving the deer a little bit too much credit. And, you know, would that have held me back any other way? I don't know, but it's a teachable moment regardless. Cause you're wrong. Like I was wrong.
That's right, man. And like KC is really specific. Like, and this is good. He always tries to think about what he says and what it actually means. Because in the South, we have all these sayings, and sometimes I think they might be called idioms or something. But like, you know, like they had these sayings, and you know, people have said them for generations, and now like people say them without even thinking, what does that actually mean? You know, and like there are sayings that like people, you know, don't really understand that, like, you know, this is actually a dirty saying, and I'm saying this to my preacher or something, you know, or like, you know, it just, you hadn't thought about that. That's the way it was originally intended or whatever, you know, it's just become this thing that you say in a certain situation. And he's really, really specific about, you know, saying things correctly. And so, like one of the sayings that you see on social media a lot is the game of cat and mouse when talking about a deer. And he's like, it's not the way it happens. It's not cat and mouse. The deer is, you know, or another one is the deer outsmarted me. And KC would rather you say that the deer is smarter than you, but he didn't outsmart you. Like, you know, so like, but with the cat and mouse thing, he's like, you know, the cat and mouse thing is like the Tom and Jerry idea that like the mouse is you know, actively almost like with vengefulness coming, you know, like coming at the cat or whatever, and like keeping from getting killed by the cat, where the deer in most cases doesn't have a clue that he's being hunted, right? Like even when a deer is wise to a hunter that is hunting it, in any random moment, he doesn't know that he's being hunted. He's instinctual. And so when he smells something, or like if he's habitual too. So like if he smelled something in a certain area when he came in last time, when he goes back to that area later on, he may circle downwind or J hook or whatever they call it, you know, to try to catch that thing. But it's only because it's very instinctual. Like you said, you can give the deer too much credit, and the cat and mouse thing drives him crazy because he thinks it's, you know, not that you want to discredit the deer, because we love the deer. We think they're awesome. They're super creatures, you know, or whatever. But he's always so specific about that, and thinking like the deer is reactive to its environment. It's not like, you know, trying to get, you know, Tom to stick his, you know, tail out the mouse hole and then smash it with a hammer or whatever, you know. So he always talks about that. It's so funny, you know.
Yeah, that's not where I thought you were going with that. Yeah, I mean, they're out there very aware that there's potential danger, and they're quick to react to it. But it's, you know, they're also out there living their life most of the year without us having anything to do with them, you know.
Exactly.
Tyler, we have gone on for a long time here, buddy. We got to wrap this up. It's always so much fun to chat with you, man. Where can everybody find your stuff out there?
Yeah, man, I appreciate the opportunity big time. And I have a lot of respect for you, man. I know you know that because we text a lot, especially in September when I'm struggling early season. You're giving me all kinds of information and stuff.
I'm like a deer hunting therapist for early September hunters.
That's right, dude. That's right. And we love you, man. We really, and Casey and I both do, especially. We really appreciate and respect you, man, and appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk for a little bit, man. And it is always fun. And if somebody's interested in checking out more of what we do, YouTube is a good place to see all these videos. We're The Element on YouTube. It's deer hunting, not skateboarding. And then theelementwild.com is our website. You can find a lot of stuff, and we're on Instagram, Facebook. We don't do TikTok like Tony and I talked about earlier, because at some point you can only give so much of yourself to this social media universe, and there's plenty of cool stuff to see on YouTube of ours. So
what about the podcast?
You want to check that out? Yeah, the podcast too. It's the Element Podcast. We've been doing that since 2016. Well, actually, technically 2017 is when we launched our first episode in January. So coming up on 5 years now in January. So been doing a lot of episodes. Had you on a couple times. So if you guys like Tony, you can check him out on our podcast too. We pretty much always do more than tactical stuff. We do like some kind of philosophical episodes usually, because we have fun and we match up on a lot of things. So
definitely.
Anyway, been fun, man.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy. That's it for this week, folks. Be sure to tune in next week for more whitetail goodness. This has been Wired to Hunt, and I'm your guest host, Tony Peterson. As always, thank you so much for listening. And if you're looking for more whitetail content, be sure to check out themeateater.com/wired to see a pile of new articles each week by Mark, myself, and a whole slew of whitetail addicts. Or head on over to our Wired to Hunt YouTube channel to view the weekly content we put up.